Hello, welcome and a very good evening, and today we want to deal with this massive thing here. This is the SEGA GameGear, and I bought this a couple of years back for really cheap, I think 30 euros or something, and it came with a bunch of games. It came with the TV tuner, which I don't expect to do anything right now, but I hope it still works because it also has an AV input. It won't work because in Germany we don't have any more of this analog television, so there won't be any signal. Problem with the whole thing here is it's dead. It doesn't do anything. So the Game Gears were plagued with bad electrolytic capacitors, so hopefully that's the only issue, but there might be other things in here. Plus the case is pretty scratched and beaten up, but I hope that we get at least the electronics working and play some games on it. However, first of all, we need to take it apart. The SEGA GameGear is interesting in fact because it is one of the very early handhelds, came out shortly after the Game Boy, which I have one example here, but this is a very late model. It's the Game Boy Color. You can already see the size difference. The original Game Boy was of course more massive as well, but the Game Gear was full color and based on the Sega Master System, whereas the Game Boy was black and white. Well, this is the color version as I said, but this came roughly, it came out in 1998, so 9 years later, and the Game Gear already had a couple of years in the market. However, the Game Gear sold not as well as the Game Boy due to different reasons. It was, I think, in the beginning more expensive. It ate more batteries. It needs 6 AA batteries compared to the 4, I think, for the original Game Boy, and the Game Boy Color here takes only 2. That was surely one of the problems. Also, I read that the Game Gear came out in Europe in April 1990 or something, almost half a year later than the Game Boy, and it missed the Christmas period basically where everybody was shopping for handhelds, so I guess that gave the Game Boy also a head start. But that is not gonna be a problem for us, because we will take this thing apart, we will try to power it on and play some games. So the power light goes on, I think, and the screen stays, well, gray. There's backlighting, but that's it. And one very, very, very common problem with these is that the capacitors fail. This is one of the usual things that people say, no matter what console or computer you have from 30 years ago, swap out the capacitors, do a recap, whatever. But to be honest, in most of the machines, the capacitors are just fine. However, the Game Gear is notorious for the fact that it has capacitors that go bad. Which is why I have 3 little bags with capacitors for the main board, the audio board, and the the power supply, I think. Yeah, this is power supply, this is audio, and this is the main board. And we will desolder all the old stuff with either the desoldering gun or the iron, because there's, I think, quite a few SMD capacitors which you can better desolder by using standard iron, maybe with a knife tip. And I already unscrewed everything here. There's still some screw flipping around here. So we'll have to detach the cables. Then I'll remove the main board, and we can then remove the black capacitors here and replace them with the new ones here. Interesting enough, these are SMD ones, which are bad, and the replacements are interesting enough through-hole capacitors, which I think we can make work. Probably because this kind of type of SMD capacitors is probably not being produced anymore. And yeah, we have to see, I don't see much, there's a bit corrosion here, but I'm not sure if you can see any leakage from the capacitors? Probably not, but they're probably bad. We can try to test them in the GM328, but we'll have to see. And then there is, this here I think is the power supply board, and this here should be the audio board. We'll take that apart as well. And if that works, we'll see, and maybe in a future episode we will upgrade the screen as well, because the screen is pretty crappy on these machines, and there are very, very good replacement screens available today. So let's disassemble this and desolder the caps on this board. So the main board is free now of the shell. And I think if this whole thing works out, I will also replace the display, which is this thing here at the top. But first of all, let's try to make it work very carefully here. Interesting fact about the GameGear and similar devices back then, they had a fluorescent tube in there because white LEDs were not invented yet. So this was the best way to get a lighting for the screen. And it's actually high voltage, so if it's powered up you should be careful or you will get a zing. And this will be the transformer for the high voltage plus this inductor here. This will be very interesting. Supposedly the capacitors are glued and soldered, so I hope I don't destroy anything, and I will do one at a time. This one here I think is the most evil because it's right next to this connector. We might want to desolder the whole connector before taking this out, which will be not a big problem with the desoldering gun, because I think this is not just a plug, but this is really soldered in place. But let's see, maybe we can get this out anyway. Yeah, those things, yeah, let's see if we can manage to take them out. I see a little bit of corrosion here and there, so we'll give it also a good clean after the soldering. Before it doesn't make sense because we will put flux on there and stuff. Yeah, so let's just try it out. We'll start with, I think, this one here because I can reach the solder pads very nicely, and I will use the pincers to try and get it out. So this is the result so far. On the right you can see all the old dirty broken capacitors, and I put in the new red ones by Vert Electronics. However, I think those were not the best option. I got them from eBay, but actually people tend to use SMD capacitors because the space in here is totally cramped, and you can't actually close the case with the capacitors sticking upright. Hence, there will be some additional work to be done, but right now I just want to get this thing working, and for that I need to have the capacitors in place. So let's just continue with the replacement and see if the machine will work. So I recapped the main board. I will probably have to rearrange the caps on the back side a little bit to be able to close it up actually, because the old ones, which are these tiny things here, lay flat, and my new ones are just regular electrolytic capacitors which usually stand upright. So yeah, there will be some work to be done. But first let's try this 9 volt center negative power supply. It should hopefully work. We get a red light, we get a screen backlight, but that seems to be it, nothing else. So yeah, unplugging. Not sure what is still missing. Might be the power supply still, or something worse. Can try and reseat the cartridge. Not even sure if that works. I put some contact cleaner on it, so I hope it will work. I don't think that the GameGear has a splash screen or something where you can see there was some kind of flashing there, but that doesn't work. Yeah, and I have to check if there are some points where I can measure stuff, if there's a troubleshooting guide. And let's see if I can check voltages. I left out the audio board because I think the audio board needs definite recapping. I see some damage there, but it should work without the audio amplification. Oh, it could have been just the contrast. I think there's a contrast wheel here. Let's try that. Yeah, that's the contrast wheel, all right. However, still nothing on the screen. All right. But good to know that I have a power supply that works with this device. So, looking up the service manual and checking if I can test anything, because there are a lot of test points on here, and get the troubleshooting going. And yeah, maybe, I mean, the caps on the power board look okay. I do have the replacement caps at hand, but not sure if that is actually necessary. Yeah, let's see. Okay, first order of the day is of course to check the power levels, the voltage levels. And I should have done that before, I think. And there's the service manual on the internet for the GameGear. And first of all, let's try and see if what I know is good is the backlight power. And this should be a ground pin, and this should read 34 volts. Yeah, it should be, I think, 35. But I think, no, 34. And that's spot on. Really spot on, 34.0. And there should be 5 volts on the first 2 pins, 4.9 and 4.9. So I think 4.9 should be good enough. So this should be battery reference 8.74. No, that's VBAT, whatever that is. And the reference is 1.27. Okay, VBAT and VREF seem to be fine, I guess. So I think the power supply board is good, which is good because I already unscrewed it, but to be able to take it out, but it's actually soldered, obviously, at 2 points to the battery compartment. And I don't want to desolder that because I need to go in here, and that's really nasty to get out. I could cut it or something. I'm not sure how other people get this board out, but I would refrain from replacing the capacitors on this board yet, because I don't think that's the problem. I think the 4.9 something is good. I think that should be enough to drive. It should be 5, I think, but I think that's good enough for the handheld. Seems stable to me. So next up will be to see if I can measure anything on this board. I think all the test points are on this side, which makes sense because you can basically only test it when assembled. The question is are there any test points where I can, for example, get the CPU clock signal or something and see that something is happening? I didn't record this section, but I took some pictures actually and got some help from a Discord server where we discussed a bit Game Gear repairs. And after a while of probing, I found all the important signals, the CPU clock, there was activity on the RAM and address and data bus lines. I even found the horizontal and vertical refresh, or maybe even the video signal, I'm not sure, but it showed that the machine was definitely alive. However, I couldn't see a picture until I looked at it in the right way and turned up the brightness knob. And then I could see something very, very faint. So a bunch of probing showed me that the machine actually works. I will have to figure something out for the capacitors. I think I have to resolder them and lie them really flat on the PCB. Didn't know that before, but that's how you learn, right? The other thing is the screen is probably broken. I hope at least that it's the screen. The picture is totally washed out no matter how I twist the brightness or contrast here, but I see a very, very slight image. So what I'm hoping for is that I can replace the screen. There are modern replacements. I will order one and then we will continue this work. So here we are back again, and the replacement parts have arrived, as well as a new mat for putting on the table while soldering. That's pretty nice. So this is the replacement audio board. Looks nice and shiny. All the parts are from the Retro Kai store, and yeah, we will see if they work. Their screen replacement is actually pretty nice. It consists of two PCBs. One of the PCBs is actually it's like a special template. This one here goes on the back of the main board, and it's supposed to make the soldering quite easy actually, because you only need to solder those cutouts here, which have like 5 volts ground. I'm not sure what GGSMS means. Oh, I don't know what that pin is for. Game Gear, Sega Master System, obviously. And there are testing pads. And these cutouts that are marked CL2, D0, D1, D2, D3, and DW are actually needed. All the other pads are just for aligning. And then you can test continuity by measuring between those pads and down here to see if there's continuity, and you know that you have soldered correctly, which is pretty neat. A ribbon cable then goes from here to the second board, which is in here. It uses a Xilinx CPLD, which is like the small little brother of the FPGA, and I guess it does the video stuff more or less. Not sure exactly, but there's some RAM on here if I see this correctly, by ISSI. So I guess that's some kind of frame buffer or something. Again, no idea. There is the second ribbon connector that goes to the actual screen. And yeah, on the back side here is the connector for this smaller ribbon cable, which goes from down here to up here, basically. The whole thing comes with a nice printed manual. We'll have to do some dremeling, I think. So we will have to cut out this thing here, because the original screen had a cutout here, the replacement one doesn't. So this post has to go, it seems. And they say break it away with your fingers, but I'm going to use a Dremel. I think that's safer, to say the least. And yeah, things that we need to do is we need to desolder the CFL, the fluorescent light, and the fuse that's below this. We need to remove the inductor here, plus two tiny resistors called R30 and R29. But those are the things that you need to remove. And after that you can remove the screen. Okay, that's off. And then we have to get rid of the actual screen. So let's put some flux on there, because there's like this Captain tape style foil going over to the screen. And we will need to remove that very carefully. Yeah, so very, very carefully let's try to do that, because we don't want to rip any of the pads. If we damage the screen connector, I think that isn't too bad, because the screen is broken anyway. Alright, so the screen is properly destroyed, but all the pads look fine, I think. So the screen goes into the garbage. And we will pick up some wick and put some more flux on it. We will clean up all this mess afterwards before soldering, because once the special PCB is in place, we can't get under there, so we need to clean it beforehand. Okay, so let's make it nice and shiny. So we have the CFL gone, the fuses are gone, the inductor that was here is gone, that yellow thing over here, and two little resistors are also gone, which are here. Those are R29 and R30, which you can't really see. They were over here. There is another thing, it's this wire here, that's the 34 volt supply for the CFL. That's also not supposed to go there anymore, and it can do damage, so we need to cut this actually. And I'm wondering if I can actually probably gonna cut this right here. And hopefully this was the right wire, or else we will have to draw a jumper or something. So I'm gonna quickly check if that was correct, but according to the instructions that should do it. Okay, yeah, that seems to be the case. This is actually correct. I'm wondering if I can rip this out completely, because this is kind of crimped, or maybe also cut it up here. Then the 34 volts won't do any harm. Yeah, I'll put that to the back of my head. Hopefully remembering this. So this is roughly clean. I think I can go there with a cotton swab once more, just to remove a last residues of flux. Using IPA, isopropyl alcohol, for removing the flux. As usual, I'm using the Emil Otto FP002 Tachyflux, which I've been using for quite a while, and it's, in my opinion, pretty good. Not cheap, but it lasted me for a lot of projects. So yeah, I think that's okay. Now comes the interesting part, actual soldering. So this is how it's supposed to be. You basically just put it on here, and there are holes in the PCB which line up with the stuff at the top. And you can see at the ends if the pins are aligning correctly at the bottom. And I think this should roughly do it. You can wiggle it left and right a little bit. Alright, so the soldering is done, but I used the blue wire that came with the kit. We need that later still to bridge the pins, because I think I aligned this a little bit too high, and I don't trust the solder bridges very much. So what I did instead, and I tried to zoom in even a little bit more, I used pieces of wire to go uphill, basically from the lower pads to the pads on this easy soldering guide. And pin 68 and pin 1 were listed in the manual somewhere to be soldered, but I don't think that they need to be soldered. I think only these 6 ones need to be. So yeah, we can do a quick continuity check with the multimeter here to see if we have continuity. So CL2 is this here, and indeed we have continuity. D0 is also good, D1, D2, D3 and DW all have continuity, which is, I think, what we wanted. So I think this more or less concludes the soldering part. What we need to do now is to install all the other boards, the LCD and the ribbon cables. So this is all a bit precarious. So the actual logic board for the screen goes in like this, and I had to bend my replacement capacitors a little bit up. And then we have to flip this over, more or less. And then there is the backlight control that has to get in there as well, which means we still need to solder something. Some wires from the backlight control over here to the backlight potentiometer. So that's that again. And then we're gonna connect the two small ribbon cable connectors here. So this should also test for continuity. There are some test pads on there. We should have ground somewhere here. Yes. Should have GGSMS, should have +5, CL2, D0, D1, D2, D3. The last one is the CW. Everything is there, that's good. And we take the actual LCD screen. And then I think we need to put it in like this. I will leave the protective screen on. Anyway, we need to insert this huge ribbon cable. Good grief, I got it in. Okay, here we are. Here goes nothing. And it's Sonic. Let's try to focus down on this. It looks awesome. It looks actually better in person than you can see here. It looks, yeah, now it looks roughly like I can see it. That's relief. It does work. The question is, are these graphics artifacts? Yeah, these are some artifacts in there. Okay, it's not perfect. Question is why that is the case. I'll probably have to, get some support from somewhere. Also need to put the wires somewhere slightly different because they are on the keypads. So I have good news and bad news. The screen mod works, and I also got rid of the noise at the right edge because I forgot to install one jumper wire. That was clearly marked on the PCB and also mentioned in the instructions actually for the VA0 board revision that I have. The bad news is sound doesn't work on the speaker. It does work partially on the audio output, but only on the left channel. So I need to take this apart once more and have a close look. Probably some minor fix, not quite sure what's happening there. There are schematics and for everything on the sound chip for the left and right sound channel. I will probe that with the scope and see if I can figure out if the sound is there at all. So I hope it isn't the sound chip, but rather something with the audio board that I just installed. But other than that, you can see display is crystal clear. The colors actually look better in person than on the iPhone. But yeah, I think this is definitely already working out pretty well. I did not yet remove the protective foil on the screen because I still want to replace the case on this one, and I want not to have any scratches on the LCD. And that's that. So let me quickly check if I can find any faults. So I figured out why the sound didn't work right. So there was a short between pin 4 and 5 of the volume wheel here on the right. I touched up all the contacts here because they looked a bit gray and dull. Well, this can happen with hardware, of course, and I'm not really mad, but yeah, I think they could use with a little bit more care in their assembly. This for sure fixed the sound, so I only had the left channel working on the headphone and the speaker wouldn't come on. So that's it for the GameGear, at least for now. We fixed it up more or less. The machine works, we can play some games. I roughly cleaned the case. However, it's so beaten up, and especially the display glass is so scratched that I ordered a replacement shell. But we will have a look at that in a future episode. Also, I will probably replace the red big, very good brand capacitors with some tiny small SMD ones, because there's so little room in this case, and I think the big electrolytic ones are actually not needed. So that's more a bit of a cosmetic thing. What do you think of the screen mod? Well, it at least gives you a functioning display. Mine was broken. Maybe it was repairable, I'm not sure. But it was definitely above my pay grade. So installation of the RetroCry display was definitely worth the effort for me. People have said bad things about the RetroCry components. My only gripe was with the soundboard by them, where they had this small solder bridge, but that happens sometimes. Was easy to fix for me. probably not easy to fix for everyone. But the seller already said that he will take better care in the future and make better solder joints, basically, which is a good thing. I think they're probably a very small company. And yeah, I think the screen so far holds up pretty good. Let's see how the whole thing fares in the new case. And the installation was also relatively easy. I think the soldering guide helped quite a bit. Although I still used the wire trick for getting all the signals to the display, which might not be the easiest thing to do if you just started soldering. This is definitely an advanced project, and I wouldn't start out with this as my first soldering project. But I think that's it for today. Please share, like, and subscribe. You can also head over to Patreon and support me there, or Ko-Fi and buy me a coffee or something. And other than that, I hope to see you next time, and until then, goodbye.